This big old world of ours suffers no shortage of edible oddities. I mean, consider the roast guinea pigs of Peru or Zanzibar's ant pies, the bird nest soups of Southeast Asia. If I told you what tacos were originally meant to hold, you'd never look at a bait shop the same way again. And yet the weirdest food of all may just be lurking in your refrigerator right now, or at the very least, your backyard. Mushrooms, like this Agaricus bisporus, are strange feed indeed. A fungus at once sinister and yet sublime, they kind of occupy that middle ground between meat and vegetable, between science and superstition, between the pit of man's stomach and the summit of his culinary knowledge. And yet, with the right care and simple cooking, well, mushrooms are welcomed citizens in that zone that we're proud to call Good Eats. Weird though it may be, the mushroom actually has more in common with an apple than athlete's foot. That's because, like an apple, a mushroom is a fruiting body, kind of seed delivery device. Only the tree happens to be embedded either in the ground or an old log, whatever it happens to be growing on. Now, these underground trees, called mycelium, can live for 100 years and can cover up to an acre of land, which makes them some of the largest living creatures on Earth. Like most vegetables, mushrooms continue to breathe post-harvest, but unlike, say, lettuce, mushrooms don't like holding their breath. Locked away in plastic, any mushroom worth its cap is going to sweat itself to gooiness in a matter of hours. On the other hand, they dry out easily too. So the best we can do is play the middle. As soon as I get them home, I seal mine in a small paper bag. Now, paper is a good choice because it holds on to moisture while letting air pass through. Even in here, though, mushrooms are going to go crazy in 3 or 4 days, so use them as soon as you can. If you insist on keeping them in their little bucket, well, at least give them a few air holes. Lastly, don't wash them until you're ready to cook the mushrooms.
What is this craziness you speak about? The champignon must never touch the water.
Yeah. I hope he knows this means war. We've all heard that tired old kitchen myth that washing mushrooms waterlogs them, rendering them
inedible, that's it.
Well, the way we see it, a fresh mushroom is already like a saturated sponge. So in order to waterlog it, you'd have to soak it in a lot more water than it would take to just give it a good bath.
Ridiculous.
To prove the point, I am going to wash these mushrooms while my raving French colleague cleans the exact same amount his way. The brush. Just to keep things completely scientific, we will give mine a weigh, both pre and post-wash. So we will know if water has been absorbed. We've got 32 ounces, or 2 pounds, including the bowl. Now, Chef, just to make you feel more at home, we've enlisted the aid of a kitchen apprentice for you to squawk at.
Ah, that's very thoughtful of you.
Let's do it.
Allez, let's go. Faster. Anthony, where is that shoemaker?
What, time to weigh in already? Well, it seems that my mushrooms, which were cleaned an hour ago, have picked up a hefty 2 ounces of water.
Ah, there, you see, I win.
Yeah, not so fast, Frenchie. Besides the fact that 2 ounces hardly qualifies as waterlogged, I do declare I spy a piece of dirt. In days of yore, food scribes described mushrooms as vegetable meat. Now, they may have been off the mark botanically, but they were dead on culinarily, because the secret to cooking mushrooms is to treat them like a piece of meat. And to us, that means hot, fast, dry cooking methods like broiling, roasting, and sautéing. Now, literally translated, sauté means jump in French, but specifically, it means to cook small, uniform pieces of food in a little bit of fat in a very hot pan, and to keep it constantly moving or jumping. Now, the first key to successful sautéing is uniformity of size, which is why I'm cutting all of my cremini mushrooms into exactly 1/4 inch thick slices. Now, granted, I've done a good bit of knife work over the years, and hey, practice does make perfect. Okay, so I cheat. So don't hate me just because I'm lazy. But the truth is that an egg slicer really is the perfect tool for cutting up meaty mushrooms like creminis and white buttons. Now, if you're using woody or stemmed mushrooms like shiitakes, just use your kitchen shears. Beats a knife any day. Okay, number 2, heavy pan, high heat. I guess that's 2 and 3, actually. Heavy pans are dense, and dense means that when food hits the pan, the heat will be maintained. That's how browning gets done. Now, ordinarily, I would do this in cast iron, but watching mushrooms cook on a black surface is kind of like taking a nap. So I'm using a traditional saute pan. It's named for the job because these straight sides provide for the widest possible cooking area. This goes over high heat. That leads us to rule number 4. Choose the right fat. Now, we need a high smoke point to prevent burning, but since mushrooms are absorbent little suckers, flavor would be good too. Now, olive oil would be okay for the job, so would bacon drippings, but as far as I'm concerned, sauteing goes best with butter. Now, I know, you're saying butter has a low smoke point. Well, you're right, it does, unless it's been clarified. Don't have time to bother? I'll make a deal with you. If I can explain it in one breath, you'll do it, okay? Fine, I must prepare. Melt a pound of butter in a heavy saucepan over low heat and slowly cook it till the bubbling ceases and the liquid turns clear, 30 to 40 minutes depending on the water. Strain and cool, being sure to leave any solids in the bottom of the pan. Or, once the butter is clear, remove the pan from the heat and quickly add 2 inches of hot tap water. Since it's less dense than the water, the now clarified butter will float to the top, and in a few hours in the refrigerator will solidify it into a big yellow frisbee that you can let out and use. Use immediately, or wrap in wax paper and refrigerate, or add foil and freeze it for 2 months. See, that was a brief. Just put an ounce of that butter in the pan. I'm going to catch my breath a little bit, okay? You'll know when it's ready with the ripples on the surface. Overcrowded pans are the #1 cause of failed sautés. You see, if the food's all piled up in there, then it can't touch the pan. And if it doesn't touch the pan, it can't undergo browning, that miraculous set of reactions that create flavor and texture and that, well, neither science nor physics has been able to explain. Have you? Come on, guys. Blind me with science. Lab punks. Now, you see here, moisture is already seeping out of these mushrooms, but the pan is so hot that it's evaporating the second that it hits the fat. And you hear that sound? That is the music of the saute. That means that the moisture is being pulled out and it's getting out of the pan in vapor form. And that means that a crust is going to be forming on this food in no time flat. As long as you hear that sound, you are sauteing. Now, you want to keep things moving around, just kind of turning things over. But what you want to avoid is that flashy kind of restaurant business of tossing the food around in the air, because you know what? Unless you're inside an oven, food doesn't cook in the air, and we're not in an oven, okay? Just turn things over. You see, this is already starting to get a crust on it. That is what sauté is all about. It doesn't matter if this is a pork chop or shrimp. That is the exact thing that we're looking for. As soon as the first batch starts to take on really nice color, like this, push it out to the perimeter of the pan. Just get it out to the coolest area. It's kind of like moving out to the suburbs. And leave room right in the middle of the pan for the next addition. Just another handful. I usually get about 4 handfuls to a pan, but I make each addition just a little bit smaller than the one before, again, because of overcrowding. Did you know that Russians are so mushroom crazy that they actually have a word for mushroom crazy? Rash. They actually say that Lenin had a real serious rash, which I think is kind of funny. But that's just me. Anyway, fight the desire to turn the heat down. You may think that things are about to burn, but believe me, they're not, because as long as you hear that sizzling, and I still hear sizzling, then there's water in there. As soon as the sizzling stops, that's when burning can happen. Of course, we don't want to strangle every little bit of juice out of the mushrooms, or they'll be like shoe leather. So just watch for the color on the outside. Okay, time for another addition. So I'm going to move everything back out to the sides of the pan. And it's starting to look just a little bit dry in there. So I'm going to add just a few drops of butter right to the middle of the pan like that. And go with another handful. This one's a little bit smaller than the one before. There. Now, as soon as you've got the final addition in the pan, it's okay to go ahead and season. Up to this point, you wouldn't want to throw salt in there because one small group of the mushrooms would take it all and leave none for the rest. So I'm going to add a pinch of kosher salt right now. And be sure to scatter it very evenly. Don't dump it in one place. I'm also going to open up a little hole right there for about a tablespoon of shallot, just minced, chopped up right there in the middle. Toss it in with the rest of the mushrooms. Everything's getting to a good, even cooking point. In the middle, over the high heat, there's still a little on the underdone side, but out across the sides here in the suburbs, things are looking really good. Now, once the heat has wrung out most of the moisture, the pan's going to darken with kind of stuck mushroom guts. It's time to deglaze with a jigger of cognac. Just pour it right into the middle of the pan. There. Now just kind of scrape around. Now, we've done some deglazing before, but it's always been in roasting pans after the food's been removed. In this case, you want to deglaze with the mushrooms in the pan so that once the liquid is dissolved, all those nice brown bits, the fond on the bottom of the pan, then the sauce can just jump right back onto the mushrooms, coating them. I'm going to finish this with a little herb, a little chive, and some grinds of pepper. Time to get out of the pan. Good looking stuff and darn versatile too. Now, besides playing sideman to every major entree from steak to scrambled, sauteed mushrooms can fuel a plethora of other dishes, from mushroom soup to meatloaf. Just about any mushroom is sauteable as long as it doesn't have a thick, woody stem. As a matter of fact, one of my favorites is the Asian newcomer, the shiitake. It's Japanese for wood grown. You see, shiitakes don't do dirt, they do logs. In fact, if you were to pick up an oak log that a shiitake colony had finished with, you notice that it feels like balsa. There's just nothing left. Now, we've worked up a pretty good appetite for shiitakes over the last few years. Problem is that once a log has been inoculated, it takes years to fruit, which just isn't fast enough for our demand. So, the answer, faux logs. Wood chip composites with shroom spore and shroom chow already in the mix. Cuts years to weeks. Having made the ultimate sacrifice, our adobe friend over there is on his way to the compost heap, but we've got a nice pan full of shiitakes. The very same dish, in fact, that we did with the criminies, except now we used the stem shiitake, so it's a slightly different dish. Now, as delicious as this saute is, you know, I'm really just not in the mood for it anymore. So I think I'm going to turn it into a paste by adding about 1/3 of a cup of heavy cream right to the hot pan. Now, since it's got a lot more fat in it than say, whipping cream or half and half, it's going to thicken much faster because there's less moisture to evaporate off. Also think I'm going to toss in, 1/4 of a cup of shredded Parmesan. Part of that's for flavor, but it'll also thicken too because it melts and those proteins uncoil and reach out for other things. Just about 30 seconds over high heat, and this will tighten up considerably. While we're at it, I think I'm going to add a little bit more flavor to boot. I'm going to go with about a teaspoon of dried tarragon. Now, tarragon is kind of the mushroom herb of choice, both in France and in Russia. Oh, in Russia, did I mention that Lenin had a really bad rash? I mentioned that, didn't I? Okay, stir a couple of times. It's already thickened up, and we're going to get it off the heat because if it overcooks, the cheese will definitely break. Now, the next step to making a paste would be to bind this up. And my favorite binder is breadcrumbs. I'm going to sprinkle on just enough to cover the surface of the mushrooms and then stir that in. The reason that breadcrumbs bind so well is, well, one, they've got a very kind of abrasive shape. They've got like these pitons that go off in every direction, and that kind of sticks into the food and holds it together. And they're extremely absorbent, so they'll soak up any moisture that tries to seep in or out of the filling. It's now a delicious and stable filler. But we really don't have anything to fill, do we? I don't know. If we could find something around here, maybe, I don't know what. What are we going to fill? We're going to fill... Oh, that's crazy talk. You want to put mushrooms inside mushrooms? That's crazy. You can't... Well, they do have a pretty good shape. They got a nice little pocket there that we could put the filling. But you know what? This isn't going to work. These are raw. That's cooked. By the time these did cook, the moisture would come out. That stuff would float away. It would be completely... Roast them, huh? Roast them before we fill them. That could work. But you know what? If we're going to push heat into these, we might as well add a little bit of flavor while we're at it. So you know what? I think I'll get a big bowl, something like this. And we'll just put about 10 of these in here, right? Just kind of a big cluster. And we'll drizzle those with some oil, okay? A little oil, maybe a tablespoon of olive oil. Kind of toss that around. And hey, would you look at that? We've got some herbs, too. Say a teaspoon of rosemary and thyme. Thyme's on our side, right? A teaspoon of thyme and a couple cloves of garlic crushed. Now, why don't you kick the oven on? 350, I think, will be fine. Now, once we've got these all kind of herbed up and lubed down, we're going to need to put them on something. Hey, I know. A baking sheet with a cooling rack. That will allow the moisture to fall away from the mushrooms so they won't waterlog. Just put them upside down so the extra moisture runs off. Just line them up on the pan like that. Then scoop up the rest of the herbs and just sprinkle right across the top. Yeah, that'll work. Now, as far as length of time, we don't want these things to cook too long because they're going to cook again once they're stuffed. So why don't we go with about... well, let's see. We want them to be kind of al dente, right? I mean, basically, you'll know they're done when you take the tip of a paring knife and you kind of just push into the mushroom and then it'll slide out nice and easy. That's how you know they're done. So I'm figuring 10 minutes tops. Well, I said 10 minutes tops. They were done in 8. See, sometimes time's not on your side and you've got to actually look at the food. So, anyway, here we are. Pretty cut and dried from here, really. Just kind of mound a tablespoon's worth, kind of right on top of the that little cavity. You don't want to push down, or the filling will just kind of pack, and it will take on a really bad texture, and it'll also cook very slowly. So, there. One last touch. More breadcrumbs. This is going to help to form a crust on top of the filling, and it'll also take some color from the broiler. Oh, while you were watching the clock, I took the liberty of moving the rack up one level and turning on the broiler. So, this is done. Back into the oven it goes. But this time, I really suggest that you don't look at the clock. You got to watch these things, because as soon as the filling bubbles a little bit and the top rounds, they are done. So don't go away. No, really, you need to wash the mushrooms. Now, despite the fact that computerized refrigerated trucks and Pony Express-style driver swapping are getting shrooms to the store quicker than ever, it still pays to be vigilant right here. For instance, don't assume that bulk, whole, loose mushrooms are any fresher than mushrooms that are packaged. See, it all comes down to what sells the quickest and gets restocked most often in your store. But I will say this, if you see condensation inside the package, beware. Same goes for unrefrigerated mushrooms or mushrooms that are, heaven forbid, under the mister. As for pre-sliced mushrooms, or pre-sliced anything short of loaf bread, just let me remind you, quality and convenience are rarely seen holding hands. Foraging for mushrooms is a lot of fun. And heck, anytime you can go out in the woods and find free food, it's got to be a good thing, right? Trouble is, if you don't know what you're doing, and I mean really know what you're doing, you're basically playing botanical Russian roulette, because sooner or later, you're going to get hold of a bad cap. And if that cap happens to be, say, the extremely common yet deceptively docile-looking death cap, then you're going to end up consuming a wide range of toxins, some of which have the habit of things like, say, dissolving your liver into a little puddle of goo, which I hear doesn't feel very good. To avoid that, here are your options. You either take the time and get the training to become an experienced mycologist, you forage with an experienced mycologist, or you go ahead and set a place at the table for Joe Black. But I assure you, death doesn't look any more like Brad Pitt than I do. Now, since I am decidedly not an experienced mycologist, I stick with store-bought mushrooms. Now, besides riboflavin and potassium, mushrooms contain high concentrations of glutamic acid, a kind of chemical cousin to monosodium glutamate. And that means that besides tasting great all on their own, mushrooms actually have the ability to turn up the flavors of the foods that are cooked with them. Pretty cool, huh? And we hope that we've turned up your interest in mushroom cookery. If you're a Fungal freshman, just kind of consider this as a primer. Believe me, there are far more flavorful caps on down the line. Chanterelles, wood ears, puffballs, you name it. But consider this. If you're capable of converting a common cremini into truly good eats, just think of what you'll be able to do the next time you see a porcini pop up in your yard. Supermarket, pop up in your supermarket. That's what I meant to say. Now, I'm Alton Brown. This is Good Eats, and I think he's taking a holiday.